A rare type of man is vanishing from our world. He is the gentle man, who believes patience is strength, understanding is love, and forgiveness fosters loyalty. He's the one who listens through shouts, stays composed through rage, and gives when others take. He calls this kindness. But the world, and especially women, often interpret it as weakness. Because deep within the feminine instinct, safety and respect are anchored not in softness, but in unyielding strength. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one." But the tragedy is this. Most gentlemen are too focused on proving their goodness to people who will never value it. They spend their lives wanting to be understood, yet what earns respect is being unshakable. They desire to be chosen for the quality of their heart, but they forget that in nature, the pack leader is not the gentlest animal. It is the one that refuses to flinch. You see, women may claim they want gentle men, but what they actually crave is the man who is gentle by choice, not because he lacks any alternative. There is a critical difference between a man who masters his power and one who is powerless. A difference every woman instinctively senses, even if she can't articulate it. When a man's gentleness lacks a foundation of strength, it registers as submission. And no woman respects submission, least of all from a man she should admire. The gentleman offers his heart, hoping to secure her presence. But the more he offers, the more he becomes unnoticed. The more he adjusts, the less she values him. This is not because she is inherently cruel, it is because nature simply doesn't reward passivity. Even the lion, if he bows his head for too long, will lose his territory to the wolves. Marcus Aurelius comprehended this perfectly. In his meditations, he advises himself, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." He did not say strength comes from being compliant, or nice, or endlessly tolerant. He said strength comes from self-command. Gentleness without command degenerates into self-erasure. It's a slow, veiled self-destruction disguised as true affection. And that is the essential, hidden reason women eventually stop respecting gentle men. They feel secure, yes, but they are not inspired. Protected, perhaps, but not fully vitalized, because what sparks their admiration isn't mere comfort, it's conviction. A man who can face the turmoil of her emotions, the chaos of life, and the madness of the world, and remain unmoved, not cold, but utterly centered. That is what gentleness was originally intended to be. Controlled fire, not a feeble candle in the wind. Every man learns this truth the hard way, not through theory, but through the pain of heartbreak. You love fully, give without limit, and trust that your inherent goodness guarantees her gratitude. But then one day, she distances herself. Not because you did anything wrong, but because the feeling she once had is gone. This is the moment every gentle man must face the raw truth. Affection dies where admiration ceases. And nothing obliterates admiration faster than sheer predictability. Marcus Aurelius was a leader in an era of war, treachery, and loss. He was not gentle because he was frail. He was gentle because he was fiercely disciplined. His composure was not softness, it was absolute control. He famously wrote, "Be like the rock that the waves keep crashing over. It stands unmoved, and the raging of the water stills around it." That is the only kind of gentleness women respect. Not emotional submission, not boundless empathy, but unshakable composure forged in personal strength. Because here is the uncomfortable reality. When a woman tests your limits, she is never looking for your surrender. She is testing for your certainty. She doesn't want your compliance. She wants confirmation that your mental foundation is stronger than her most turbulent moods. And if you relinquish your personal authority to appease her emotions, you cease to be a man she can revere. You become a mere mirror, reflecting her chaos instead of providing a solid anchor for it. The gentleman believes he is demonstrating love by making her happiness his ultimate purpose. But in doing so, he destroys the very polarity that created the initial attraction. He becomes her emotional servant rather than her emotional anchor. He sacrifices his edge, the very quality that made him desirable. And before long, she begins to feel a strange, inexplicable guilt. Because deep down, women fundamentally do not want to be the emotional leader of their man. They desire to find rest in the presence of a man whose inner peace is stronger than their own emotional storms. Marcus Aurelius understood this necessary balance acutely. He reminded himself, if it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it. Gentleness without firm personal righteousness is hypocrisy. It's a persona adopted to be liked, not a principle embodied to be respected. And that is the fundamental distinction between the Stoic and the nice guy. The Stoic acts from a place of virtue. The nice guy operates from a place of fear. Fear of confrontation. Fear of disapproval. Fear of ultimately losing her. But a man whose life is dictated by the fear of loss is already a captive. He will concede, apologize, and rationalize until he is barely recognizable. And the more he compromises, the more her natural instincts repel him, because nothing in nature respects what blindly worships it. Even love requires tension, a blend of strength and softness intertwined. Remove one, and the other loses its potency. Modern men are raised under the delusion that niceness is the highest moral virtue. They are instructed to be agreeable, polite, permissive, and endlessly empathetic, as though being inoffensive were the same as being honorable. But Marcus Aurelius would have labeled that a deep sickness of the soul. He wrote, "Do not act as if you had 10,000 years to throw away. Death stands close by. In other words, stop living solely to be liked. Stop diminishing your personal fire just to make others comfortable. A man who trades his integrity for temporary harmony ends up surrounded by a kind of peace. But it is the empty peace of irrelevance. Today's culture trains men to fear dominance, to apologize for masculinity, to equate personal power with outright cruelty, so they suppress it. They exchange their assertiveness for approval, their firm conviction for simple compliance, their essential edge for general acceptance. And when that surrender occurs, women do not see kindness. They see hesitation. They do not feel protected. They feel a profound absence, because the modern gentleman has been taught to be emotionally available, but is existentially invisible. Marcus would have felt pity for him. He would have declared, "It is not death that a man should fear, but he should fear never beginning to live." And that is exactly what is happening to millions of good men today. They never truly begin to live. They spend their lives meticulously crafting themselves for the comfort of others, confusing diplomacy with depth. They mistake emotional intelligence for self-erasure. But you cannot be genuinely respected by anyone, especially not by a woman, when you no longer exist as a powerful force in the story of your own life. Gentleness devoid of backbone becomes submission. And submission extinguishes attraction far more quickly than even anger ever could. A woman might eventually forgive a man for being too forceful, too blunt, or too brutally honest, but she will never forgive him for being forgettable. Because every woman secretly yearns to stand alongside a man she can naturally look up to, not constantly look down on. She is not looking for another emotional equal. She desires gravity, something substantial she can orbit around. And here is the core paradox. Women claim they desire perfect equality, but in their innermost hearts they crave polarity. They want to feel his absolute calm when they are anxious, his firm direction when they are confused, his certain conviction when they are unsure, not because they are weak, but because that dynamic is ancient and essential. It is the necessary balance between chaos and order, yin and yang, emotion and reason. But when a man refuses to embody his inherent strength, when he takes cover behind excessive politeness and passive empathy, she immediately senses a void. She begins to feel like she is dating a mere reflection instead of a solid, immovable foundation. Marcus Aurelius would advise that man, stand upright, not be held upright, meaning stop waiting for external permission to fully be who you are. The world respects men who govern themselves, not men who perform acts of goodness, because respect is not freely granted to the utterly harmless. It is given to the harmless man who possesses the capability for harm, but consciously chooses restraint. That is the definition of true gentleness. Power mastered, not power missing. Every woman subjects a man to tests, not because she is malicious, but because she is fundamentally searching. She is searching for the definitive edge that tells her, I can utterly trust this man's strength. This is not a deliberate, conscious act. It is pure instinct. When she challenges you, questions your decisions, or disrupts your composure with emotional storms, she is not inviting you to physically fight her. She is simply demanding that you hold your ground, and that is where the majority of gentle men fail. They confuse patient restraint with total passivity, empathy with absolute surrender, and love with unquestioning obedience. So they fold, and by folding, they tragically confirm her deepest, most critical fear, that the man she relies on emotionally cannot even reliably lead himself. Marcus Aurelius faced tests far greater than any relationship could ever present: war, plague, treachery, the death of his own children. He never once begged the world to be kind to him. He commanded himself to remain internally strong. He wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." That is the absolute core of male respect. It appears when you stop needing others to behave in a certain way for you to stay composed. Women can instantly feel it when you become that kind of man. When your calm is not silence but absolute control. When your gentleness is born not from need but from choice. They sense it in your voice's tone, your physical posture, and the way you look at them without flinching when they are deeply emotional. You become gravity, not reacting, not retreating, just fully present. And suddenly, her previous tests cease being attacks. They transform into a necessary dance of polarity. She pushes, you remain utterly grounded. She withdraws, you remain solidly centered. That is when true respect blossoms, not from any kind of fear, but from a sense of awe. But if you flinch, constantly apologize for merely existing, or collapse into guilt every time she is upset, you teach her something deeply poisonous, that her immediate emotions inherently outrank your core principles. Marcus Aurelius was utterly ruthless about the need for emotional discipline. He said, "If someone can prove me wrong and show me my mistake, I will gladly change. But if not, I will follow the path I know is right." That is the only way a truly stoic man successfully navigates her tests, through unflinching truth, not emotional reaction. You don't engage in arguments simply to win. You don't beg just to be seen. You simply stand, firmly rooted in your values and anchored in your purpose. And the paradox is that this quiet strength instantly reignites her profound femininity. Because a woman cannot comfortably relax into her own softness when the man beside her possesses none of his own necessary hardness. So when she tests you, do not resent it. She is not trying to attack your masculinity. She is powerfully inviting it out of hiding. She is silently saying, "Show me that you are capable of carrying the weight of both of us without fracturing. And if you can do that, she will finally be able to rest." Because women do not submit to mere words. They surrender to energy, to undeniable presence, to the man who does not lose his entire self in a desperate attempt to please her. There is a defining moment every man reaches when he fully grasps: you cannot earn respect through kindness alone. Respect is not freely given out of simple gratitude. It is powerfully evoked through presence. and presence is born exclusively from discipline, not from fleeting desire. Gentlemen who choose to live in the shifting shadow of other people's moods never realize how immensely powerful they could become if they simply stopped seeking their approval. Because once you cease chasing the superficial image of being the good man, you are finally free to become the real man. And the real man, the Stoic man Marcus Aurelius meticulously described, is not defined by how softly he speaks, but by how utterly unmovable he is when life screams at him. He wrote, "The best revenge is not to be like your enemy," meaning don't let the world make you bitter, but more importantly, don't let it make you structurally weak. A true Stoic will not bend his core principles to fit people's comfort levels. He becomes a vital mirror of order in a world hopelessly addicted to chaos. And that is what women fundamentally respect. Not simple control, not outright dominance, but inner structure. The quiet, unassuming authority of a man who masterfully governs himself before he attempts to govern anyone else. When a woman feels that, when she genuinely feels your peace is not a performance but a tangible reality, everything changes. She completely relaxes. She stops all the testing, because she finally genuinely believes, this man doesn't need me to feel complete as a man. And that is the powerful moment when love begins to flow freely again, not stemming from guilt or fear, but born from deep, enduring admiration. Because women do not want to be forced to lead. They want to be confidently able to trust. And trust is born from consistent, reliable composure. Every single time you remain calm when she is chaotic, direct when she is utterly confused, and solidly grounded when she is emotional, you build something far more potent than simple attraction. You build reverence. But to achieve that level, you must first ruthlessly confront your own internal weakness. That desperate craving to be universally seen as nice. That profound fear of being disliked. That nervous reflex to over-explain or to over-apologize. Gentleness is utterly meaningless without the necessary ability to enforce clear boundaries, and boundaries themselves are meaningless without the deep courage to withstand disapproval. That is precisely why Marcus Aurelius's gentleness was universally respected. It was not born from fear of others. It was meticulously forged through fire. He faced death, betrayal, and immense loss, yet he never surrendered his inherent dignity to raw emotion. That is the true essence of masculine energy. Emotional containment, not cowardly emotional denial. When a man learns to remain silent without resentment, strong without arrogance, and kind without any hint of weakness, he becomes a profound rarity. And in a world that is completely drowning in needless noise, true rarity commands immense value. You do not need to shout to be respected. You simply need to master your internal stillness, because stillness is the quiet form of power. The man who doesn't nervously rush to defend himself, to frantically prove his worth, or to constantly chase validation, genuinely terrifies people who thrive on chaos, and deeply fascinates women who crave absolute safety. That is the core paradox Marcus Aurelius lived by. Gentleness only has meaning when you possess the full ability to choose the alternative, yet consciously refuse to. So, if you genuinely want women to respect you, stop futilely trying to convince them. Stop constantly explaining your goodness. Just simply become the kind of man whose silence organically says more than another man's most elaborate speeches. When she looks at you and senses, not hears, but senses, that you could confidently walk away at any moment, not out of anger, but out of absolute self-respect, that is when her true admiration awakens. Because every woman ultimately desires a man who could easily conquer her world, but instead consciously chooses to master his own. There exists a kind of power that has zero need to be loudly proven. It doesn't originate from muscles or money or outright dominance. It comes purely from stillness, the kind of stillness that instinctively makes people speak softer when you walk into a room, the kind that naturally calms utter chaos without you saying a single word. That is the essential power Marcus Aurelius lived and eventually died with. Not loud, not overtly flashy, just absolutely certain. And that is the indispensable power gentlemen must urgently reclaim. Not the tired performance of goodness, but the deep embodiment of internal order. Because every man possesses two distinct voices inside him. One nervously whispers, "Be nice, stay safe, don't upset anyone." The other powerfully says, "Stand tall, speak your truth, even if it costs you love." The first voice will readily win you temporary approval. The second will genuinely earn you lifelong respect. And the difference between those two voices is the decisive line between simply being liked and being authentically remembered. You were fundamentally not born to just please others. You were born to lead, not in the corporate or political sense, but in the spiritual and existential one. To lead yourself confidently through every storm, to command your most unruly emotions, to inherently bring peace into rooms others fill with noise. That is precisely what the Stoics meant by true virtue, self-mastery. And that is what every woman unconsciously craves. Not unattainable perfection, but profound presence. A man who can look her firmly in the eyes when she is completely unraveling and still remain the unmoved center of gravity she can completely trust. That is not harshness. That is masculine mercy. But here is the most profound secret Marcus Aurelius left behind for men who are willing to read between his lines. The gentleness that successfully earns respect is never a tactic. It is simply the natural, inevitable fragrance of power that is fully under control. You do not have to announce it, defensively explain it, or desperately demand validation for it. You simply live it, calmly, consistently, relentlessly. And the world naturally begins to orbit around your steadfast silence. So if you have been previously told your kindness is a curse, remember this. It only becomes one when it is fundamentally disconnected from strength. Fuse the two, and you become absolutely unstoppable. Because real gentleness does not anxiously seek to be understood. It simply is. It is the quiet, assured confidence of a man who possesses the power to destroy, but consciously chooses to protect. The man who could passionately argue, but instead calmly observes. The man who could desperately beg, but instead quietly walks away. That is the man Marcus Aurelius would have proudly called free. And that is the man women will never stop respecting. So, brothers, if this message resonated deeply within you, don't just idly nod and scroll away. Reflect, act, and transform. And if you want to continue to rise alongside men who think like this, who build strength without losing their heart, then make absolutely sure you like, share, and subscribe. Support the necessary continuation of this channel through the link provided in the description. And let's keep collectively building a world where gentleness is never weakness. It is power mastered.